What would that make me, bro? Like, who would I be if I let my homies kill my brother?
I have a brother from O Block. How did that affect your relationship?
It really didn't.
Welcome back to another episode of Tru-Street TV, where we cover everything street related. Hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell, and let's get right into it. Today's story brings us back to Chicago, Illinois, the city where drill music and many gangs were born. Chicago street culture and gang culture run so deep that many gang members have family from opposing gangs, like D-Rose from 600 and FBG Duck being cousins, as well as Lil Durk and Lil Mister being cousins. And in some extreme examples, some of the men in opposing gangs are blood brothers. For example, Buka and Lil D are from 600, and their older brother Ronte is from Jaro City. Many songs have been made in Chicago regarding these types of situations, including King Von and Just Blow's song called Cousin.
Like fuck it, it's bustin'. One of my ops, my cousin. I tell him stay up out the way, he with them ops, I'm up.
As well as the song Fuck My Cousin by Lil Zay Osama.
Auntie call my phone through Facebook, tell me squash it with my cousin. This is so deep right now, I can't tell my killer's ass in public, nigga.
And with that being said, that brings us to the man we're here to talk about today. 34-year-old Michael Wade, more commonly known as Big Mike, and 27-year-old Marvell Williams, also known as Wooski. Big Mike was born in Indianapolis, as his father had moved his mother out there with him, but that wouldn't work out, and their mother would make her way back to Parkway Gardens when Big Mike was only a few days old, and he would be given the nickname Twoop by his mother as a child. Here, Big Mike will become close friends with many original Parkway members like Trey 5, White, Platoon, OD, and C Murder, who is currently facing a mandatory life sentence for the death of FBG Duck. A few weeks after Big Mike's 6th birthday, his little brother Wooski was born. Wooski's father was a well-known street dude on the south side and would sadly be killed before Wooski even turned a year old. Big Mike would describe Wooski as a loose screw and always getting into it with people since a young child, and if somebody were to hit him, Wooski would chase them all day until he got his lick back. In turn, this would become a running game to the kids in O Block around Wooski's age. As Big Mike explained, guys would smack Wooski upside his head and take off running, knowing Wooski would chase them.
Like that because people kept fucking with him when he was little, bro. Once they found out that they can hit him and dip and take off running and he gonna be chasing them all day, people felt like that shit was fun. They felt like it was fucking fun to slap this man upside his head and take off running knowing he finna chase you all day because he won his lick back.
This would turn into Wooski getting very violent and hitting guys with bike chains and bats, and because of this, he never got along with the O Block crowd and would spend a lot of his childhood going over to GD hoods like E Block and Hottie Way, which he had family that lived at, including multiple of his brothers. Wooski and Big Mike have a lot of brothers, as their mom had 6 sons and a daughter, and Big Mike's father also has a son and 2 daughters, not including Big Mike. A few of their well-known brothers go by the nicknames Fella, Ballski, Lawski, and Jay the Shooter, which we'll speak more about them later. Big Mike was causing so much trouble in O Block, from breaking windows to throwing works bombs in apartments. A works bomb is putting toilet cleaner in a water bottle like works, and also stuffing tinfoil in the water bottle. This would make the bottle explode, and Big Mike doing these antics would result in his family being kicked out of O Block in 2005. And in turn, they would move over to 72nd and Champlain. This was the ideal move for Wooski and his brothers, but not for Mike, as he would still go back to O Block frequently, as that was his hood where all his friends still lived. And a few years later, in 2008, 3 men were shooting dice by the names of Marshawn Melker, Terrell Griffin, and Kier Reese. A young 11-year-old Wooski was near the men and would witness Kier lose his money and begin asking Marshawn for $2 back so he could get on the bus. But Marshawn wasn't willing to give Kier anything, and in turn, Kier would pull out a gun and shoot Marshawn to death, and also shoot Terrell, but Terrell would survive this shooting. Police would track down Wooski, and he would tell them what happened and actually testify in court 2 years later on what he seen. And in the end, Kier would be found guilty and sentenced to over 70 years in prison, where he still sits today. Some people will call Wooski a snitch for this, but in my opinion, children shouldn't be held to street standards. And although Wooski did say he jumped off the porch at around 7 years old.
What age would you say you jumped off the porch? 8, 9, 10, 7?
Shit. I say about 7.
I don't have a problem with Wooski did, as he was still a child, but comment below what you guys think about this. This is also around the time King Von began coming to O Block, but as Big Mike was a few years older, he would say Von and the kids his age were playing baseball at Douglas every day and weren't really in the streets yet, but he knew Von was going to be like that, as he was willing to prove himself to the older guys.
Like playing baseball and shit. So like we'd catch them on the back of Douglas playing baseball and shit like that. But this one, like, Vaughn ain't live in the hood, but he was in the hood. You know what I'm saying?
And around a year later, in 2009, Big Mike would make a big mistake. He was in O Block with members Big A and another guy who went by Lil Will, who I wasn't able to identify. The trio would spot a white man walking near Parkway at around 3 in the morning when they would approach him and rob him at gunpoint. Little did the group know this man was an off-duty state trooper and he was in the area at the time of the night to meet a prostitute, and the group would get his gun as well as around $300. Mike would run off. As police quickly responded to the scene, he would end up running to the roof of one of the buildings in Parkway before police would eventually make their way up there and beat him up before taking him to jail. Him and Lil Will would be convicted of this, but Big A wasn't caught, and Big Mike would eventually be sentenced to 9 years at 50%, leaving him to serve 4.5 years in prison. And that would also leave Big Mike to be sitting in prison while the war really kicked off, and he would lose a lot of friends while being locked up. In 2011, Big Mike and Wooski would lose close friends, Wooski's friend being Tuka, who would pass away after being shot multiple times at a bus stop, as well as OD Perry months later in the same year. These deaths were instrumental in the drill scene and to the brothers as well, as Woozi was close friends with Tuka and Big Mike was very close with OD. And Mike will go on to say all the younger guys merch on OD but didn't know him and were never in shootouts with him like Mike was.
Everybody that's running around right now, merching it on him. Like, I see kids right now, you know what I'm saying? Them kids to me, they 18, 19, 20 years old, them kids.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Them niggas running around with O was alive, so you around here merching on somebody you don't even fucking know. You know what I'm saying? Then you talking about you acting like OD, you ain't know what the fuck he did because you ain't never was with him. You ain't never been with him in no shootouts or nothing like that. Me? I've been there.
His death would heavily affect Mike, and he said he would crash out beating up ops as soon as he got the call, and he would end up having to serve a year in the hole for this. And a year later, in 2012, Mike would take another massive loss as his close friend White White was killed by Gyro City 50 shots after walking out of a corner store. This is a very famous hit, as King Von raps about this in the song Demon, as he would say this is the incident that turned him into a demon.
Why they got killed, I seen it. I was right there, still can't believe it. Damn, shit turned me to a demon.
And crazy enough, Wooski was rumored to be alongside 50 shots on this hit, but I can't confirm that to be true. Police would actually witness 50 shoot and kill Whitey and would approach him, and 50 shots would shoot at the officers and attempt to flee. But officers would return fire, hitting him in the leg, and he would be convicted for this and sentenced to 90 years in prison.
Fuck the cops, tell them free my nigga 50 shots.
And around this time, Wooski would fully jump off the porch and begin running with 63rd, St. Lawrence, and Gyro City, as well as Hottie Way, which are all GD hoods into it with the BDs, especially O Block and 600. Big Mike would claim he knew nothing about his brother's affiliations until he would call Wooski one day from prison, and Wooski would tell him he's not three-weighing any of Big Mike's homies and he's on their ass. Big Mike would also say this would cause a lot of friction between him and his hood because Wooski was so wild.
I ain't really find out that Wooski was in that shit until a phone call. I was making a phone call. This one motherfucker still had house phones. I made a phone call from the prison to my mama house phone and shit when we were staying on 72nd and Vernon. And when I called it, lil' bro was there and shit. Now, mind you, he was still a fucking baby. But I was like, man, I need you to bust this three-way for me. And he was like, man, I ain't calling no niggas from Parkway, man. And I was like, what? The fuck you mean? Like, I ain't calling nobody from Parkway, bro. I'm on their ass. That's when I first found out that my little brother was beefing with my people.
He became a main target, but Big Mike was standing behind his brother and would say if any of his friends killed his brother, they would all die. And this same year, on October 13, 2012, 16-year-old Richard Modell, who was from STL EBT, would be shot to death, and this is one of the murders widely recognized as King Von's work. And Modell was also the cousin of Wooski, and this affected him heavily, making him hate O Block even more, and he would begin dropping music in 2013, releasing a song titled Dummy.
Bitch, we don't dime me. Got a 40 on my way, short time me. We drumming niggas down, we don't dime me. We don't dime me. We don't dime me.
And he would go on to release multiple other songs in 2014. Big Mike would eventually be released from prison at the top of 2014 after serving a little over 4 years. By this time, Von was now a grown man, around 20 years old, and was a huge problem for 63rd, being recognized as the most active member from O Block alongside T-Roy, not including 600 members, as 600 was known to have multiple outstanding members that Von was very close with. Big Mike would go to Von's house right as he got out of prison and would say they needed to get back for OD, and he felt like O Block members were scared to slide after OD's death. And Von was on house arrest, but they would both agree that as soon as he got off, they were gonna get wild for OD.
On house arrest and shit, so we went to his mama crib and shit. We was over there in the basement just kicking in and shit, you know, rotating and shit like that. And shit, I told him like, man, look, you know, a lot of these niggas scared over there, but we got to get back for OD folk. You know what I'm saying? So he was like, all right, cool. You know, he like, man, whatever you want, just wait till I get off house arrest, you feel me? And we gonna be doing us. I'm like, all right, cool. So me and him was like the menaces on the block.
And the two would also go on to get O-Block tattoos together, both big across their chest. As Mike explained, they got the tattoos together. As most members got it on their neck, they wanted theirs to be different. Mike would get arrested for being around gang members multiple times in the next few months as he was on parole. And that brings us to the night of May 29, 2014. King Von would attend the party celebrating the birthday of 20-year-old LaVon Eberhardt, who went by the name CJ. CJ was from the same hood that Von was originally from, Killer Ward, which explains why Von was at this party. But after allegedly exchanging dirty looks with some guys, Von would leave the party and call Big Mike and go pick him up, intending on sliding back to the party. And they would do just that. The duo would emerge from a gangway and fatally shoot 19-year-old Malcolm Stuckey, striking him in the head. And they would also begin shooting at two other men, as Von would shoot 23-year-old Marquise Carpenter in the leg and face, but he luckily survived this, along with 24-year-old Timothy Robinson that Big Mike supposedly shot in the foot as he ran away. Von and Mike quickly ran away, and it didn't take long for people close to Malcolm to begin cooperating with the police. Big Mike would describe a female he was dealing with at the time, calling him and asking him about the murder, which seemed suspicious. Big Mike would deny being present for this, and the girl would shortly after call him back, saying the police made her call him on speakerphone as they listened, hoping he would admit to this.
I'm saying the little bitch had called me and shit, and she was like, shit, they just showed me a picture, you know, and shit, and it was talking about she was involved with a murder on 57 of the South. So I'm like, what the fuck you mean they showed you a picture of me and told you that I was involved in a murder? Whole time in my mind, I'm knowing ain't no cameras over there. So how the fuck you got me leaving the scene of the crime? So I was like, man, they ain't got me. That's somebody else. I don't know who the fuck y'all talking about. So she like, I just wanted to let you know, your name got brought up and shit. I'm like, my name got brought up. That means somebody brought up my name. Like somebody telling lies. So at this point, I'm knowing what's going on. She sitting in the police station and got me on speakerphone, and you know, the detectives and shit right there.
But although he denied it, just 52 days later, on July 20th, 23-year-old Big Mike would be arrested and charged with first-degree murder, along with 2 attempted murders for the other 2 men that were shot. And surprisingly, Big Mike would fold in the interrogation room and admit to being present, and he would admit to being a shooter alongside Von, but he would attempt to deceive the investigators, saying the men had shot at him and Von first, and that's why they returned fire. Big Mike would also express how he felt like this wasn't really snitching and his best way out of the murder, but in all actuality, if he would have just said nothing, he probably could have walked on these charges.
That's what it was. Once I got presented with what was going on and what it was, I knew the best way for me to get up out that. Well, I didn't know. I thought the best way for me to get up out that shit was just telling them like shit. Them niggas shot at me first. That's what happened type shit. Right.
But police now had a confession, and Mike was held without bond, and 4 days later, King Von, who was already in jail on unrelated charges, would also be charged with the murder and 2 attempts. But unlike Mike, Von would say nothing to police, even denying knowing who Big Mike or the victims were. The two would now begin fighting the cases while being locked up in the same jail with each other for long stretches of time, still being friends. While locked up, Big Mike's brother Wooski's name was ringing in the streets as well as in music as he remixed King Louie's B.O.N. in 2015. He actually went crazy on this remix, but he would go viral for a line where he said they steady asking him where he get them kicks at. And funny enough, the cameraman would actually zoom in on Wooski's shoes, which were some regular Air Force Ones in worn condition.
All designer shit, but it's mismatch. They steady asking me where you get the kicks at. Get it off my dick.
And in December of 2017, a little over 3 years later, King Von will go to trial for this, and he would sit down with Big Mike, who agreed to take his statement back. This statement, being the only real evidence against them, would end in Von being acquitted on all the charges. Big Mike also mentioned half of Von's jury was black, which was rare in Cook County cases.
What's your story?
My story, shit. Yeah. I just got out of jail for just beat a body in 2 attempts, like, December?
Von would walk free from these charges and release his first song titled Beat That Body the next year in 2018.
Oh boy, what the fuck I'm known for? Caught a body, beat that body, catch some more.
Because Big Mike wasn't willing to testify against Von, his statement couldn't be used in Von's trial, but it was still used against himself, and Big Mike would be acquitted of the murder of Malcolm Stuckey and the attempt of Marquise in trial. But he would be found guilty in the shooting of Timothy in the foot and receive 28 years in prison for this. And as we all know, King Von would go on to be one of the biggest rappers to ever come out of the drill scene, and he would mention Big Mike telling on him in multiple songs. Notably, the song Why He Told is specifically about Big Mike.
Boy was realer than the bitch, man, I don't know how he folded. He coulda hit the him with the script, but he ain't sugarcoat.
Mike would tell DJU that he was calling Von every day after he beat his case, and him and Von were still close friends, which I can't believe, as the viral video went around of King Von slipping out of his cuffs and beating up 051 Freaky for having a Fuck LA tattoo. Big Mike was actually the one who helped Von get out of his handcuffs.
Jail fight that was surfacing online between King Von and 051 Freaky.
For sure.
According to the video we was looking at, they say this Big Mike that helped Von slip out his cuffs.
Yeah.
But shortly before King Von began rapping, Wooski would release one of the biggest songs to come out of the drill scene, and known as one of the most disrespectful songs, as he released Computers on January 2nd, 2018. This instantly made Wooski famous in the city, and the song had racked up well over 40 million views to date. This song will make Wooski one of the top targets from STL/EBT, and although Big Mike asked Von to leave his brother alone, this was no longer the case.
Stood over J Money and put four in his grill, for real. Now go ask Lil Boo how that hot shit feel. HK got caught trying to pump fake and folk got on his heels.
Less than a month later in February, Wooski would go on to collab with Dusky the Man from MOB on the song Shooters. This was another big song and has almost 5 million views.
Rest in peace, Lieutenant Tuka, all these fucking shooters. We shoot shit like a dream team, but no, we not no Ubers.
And also in April, Wooski and Young would collab on a song called Sleeping With It, which has right under 2 million views.
These niggas know how we rock. Pull up with him in the box.
And just 2 months later, Wooski would make a huge mistake, being charged with attempted murder of a man who identified Wooski as the person who shot him. And at the time of Wooski's arrest, he was also found with the gun that was used in the murder of Mubu Crump, which really isn't surprising, as guns get passed around a lot, especially after they've been used in a crime. Hoods will swap guns.
I just caught one head, just caught one head. He callin', we swapping Drake's, nigga.
And the witness would eventually take their statement back, and Wooski would eventually beat this case. But I'm confused on when he actually was arrested, because Wooski would say in an interview he sat in the county for a few years fighting this case, but he was out towards the end of 2018. So maybe the dates are mixed up, because just a few months later, things will go very bad for Wooski. On October 9, 2018, it was just before 4 p.m. in broad daylight, 24-year-old Dusky, real name Vantrese Cross, was standing in the MOB territory on the 5600 block of South Michigan when a brown vehicle pulled up and began shooting at Dusky alongside a woman who was hit and survived, but Dusky was struck multiple times and would sadly lose his life from this. Dusky was well loved, and as we talked about in the Take Up Home story, Tay has stated that MOB were the BD's most active ops alongside 051, and when they lost a member, they would instantly spin back for revenge. And they would do just that, as a day later, 600 would lose a well-loved member named Waldo, real name Ramon Dobine. It was around 4:30 p.m. in broad daylight when Waldo was walking on the 200 block of 63rd Street when a vehicle pulled up next to him and would shoot him multiple times, fatally striking him in his head. Nobody would ever be arrested for this, but it's widely rumored to be retaliation for the murder of Dusky. And around 2 weeks later, Dusky's funeral was being held at the Bethlehem Star Missionary Baptist Church located on 92nd and Cottage Grove. The funeral was going just fine until around 12:30 p.m. when 4 shooters would run up and begin firing at the crowd at the funeral. 63rd members began shooting back, and when all the smoke cleared, 6 people had been shot, including Wooski.
There were a total of 6 people who were shot outside the church. It was a pandemonium, a scene of pandemonium right after that happened. Many of those people who were shot were leaving a funeral inside the church. 6 of them injured, 4 of them were taken by paramedics to hospitals. 2 of them drove themselves. None of their injuries considered life-threatening at this point.
Wooski, with himself taking the worst of it, he was struck in the forehead, but luckily survived this.
So Wooski supposedly, was the one running up on her ass, you know what I'm saying, trying to, but he wound up taking the worst of it. But once I saw Wooski do like this across his head, he was laying on the ground, and I saw him do this with his hand, I said, oh, he good.
Also, he was still conscious.
He was still conscious. He wiped the blood off his face.
Many rumors would be spread after this, some saying Wooski was hit by friendly fire and some saying he got hit by a ricochet bullet from a 7.62. That had hit the ground first, which would make sense as he did survive the headshot. 4 shooters would jump into 2 separate vehicles and flee the scene, and no one was ever arrested for this. All the fingers will be pointed at O Block and 600 as they just told Wooski on FaceTime days prior that they had a surprise for them.
This your big brother, yeah, you know what the fuck going on. That's your big brother, you know.
I wish I could say one of y'all was my boys. You got all goofies over there.
I ain't tell you what to do it tonight on
What y'all off the courage? What made y'all do it tonight?
We gon' surprise.
It's time about tonight.
We gon' surprise, bro.
Yeah, the bitches out for the free.
But surprisingly, 800 will actually take credit for this in multiple songs.
Plus we'll walk out his shit's black. Y'all always talking about that get back. Why y'all still ain't get his lick back? Wooski headshot that one enough. They still ain't trying to get back at us. Not to miss. This is no auto, but that's a little dirt from them shit to the funeral. I shot up the church.
And Big Mike would even confirm this in a No Jumper interview.
I mean, ain't that still King Von is out to do some shit?
Shorty them from 800 is Lil Von Shorties?
Oh, I didn't know.
No.
So you saying it was from 800 who did that to Wooski?
Man, everybody know who did that to my brother. The whole streets know who did that to him is Bucks.
He got charged for it?
No, he on some other shit that he ain't never coming home for.
To this, being dissed in countless songs, especially by King Von.
Chopper got a kickback, Wooski got his shit splat. I'm the king with Faso, who shot Wooski, how I know. Wooski got shot, now he taking medicine, but anyway, GDK. Bet Wooski feel this one, I bet Wooski still twitching. He changed something different. Right, he got hit in his shit, I bet he got the message. Goofy got shot right up in his top, his brother told on me.
Check on your mans, I heard he got hit in his head. But he almost died, so I can say his name cause he ain't dead. How you?
A OPP got hit in his TOP and he ain't even die.
And although Wooski did survive, he does have cognitive delays following this, as to be expected after getting shot in the head and having surgery to get the bullet removed.
What y'all know where to pull up at? We right here with, what is this? 62nd Eberhard.
Eberhard.
30 St. Miles, Vernon, bro. Cheeto. RIP to free the guys. Cracker trays dropping wide. Shit. The first place I remember living is 73rd Street. I was in there like around 4 or 5 or something.
And 2 months after this, J-Mane would release a song him and Wooski previously recorded, dropping Gummo on December 16th.
On the train, cracking trains and we dropping wines. Top shells look like first fire land, nigga, this quick shot there, he died.
And after this, Wooski would lay low and stop rapping for a while as he was recovering from his serious injury. His brother Big Mike was serving his 28 years and King Von was out dissing Mike and Wooski in multiple songs. 2 years later in 2020, Wooski would return to the booth, releasing Back from the Dead in August.
The youngest still gripping on there, you know what, when they see us, they run, so we gon' hit the cut.
And as we all know, in November of 2020, King Von was fatally shot after fighting with Quando Rondo. Mike would explain how he put in an appeal, blaming the whole shooting on King Von, and he would actually win the appeal, being given another chance at sentencing.
The appeal and shit like that, but the shit that he was putting in there was like making sense and shit. Like, I ain't do that shit, dude did that shit. You feel me? You know what I'm saying? It was even better that, you know, I don't like speaking on dead niggas, but it was even better that shit. He was deceased. You know what I'm saying? For me to be able to get back, because as soon as he died, that's when my shit came right through.
As the judge lowered his charge down to aggravated discharge of a firearm, and he would be resentenced to just 11 years in prison at 85%, leaving Big Mike with just under 2 years to serve. He would eventually be released on parole on October 11, 2023. And sadly, just months before Big Mike was released, Woosie's brother, 29-year-old Ladarius Williams, who went by the nickname Lawski, was at a party with JHE Flame in the suburbs, located about 45 minutes from where the men were from. Around 3 a.m., shots would ring out in the basement of this party, and Lawski was sadly pronounced dead at the scene from multiple gunshot wounds. Flame was also struck in the arm, and the 19-year-old from Waukegan and another 28-year-old from Chicago were shot and underwent surgery, which they would survive.
But we hear commotion and shit. When we hear the commotion, we hear motherfuckers get into it. It sound like a glass broke. So now we running up there to see what's going on. As we running up there to see what's going on, it wasn't nothing but shots just ringing out. Them bitches coming from everywhere. So as them bitches coming from everywhere, he pushed me. When he pushed me, I put my hand in front of the motherfucking, in front of my face, because I didn't know where them bitches was coming from. That bitch just went right across my arm. But as I'm running, I ain't even know that he was laying. He was just laying right there. I thought he was just laying right there, so when no bullets hit him. But when we turn around, he was just bleeding bad. Like that shit fucked my whole. That shit fucked my ear up, bro. That shit was crazy as hell.
And a 19-year-old named Lil Pooh from a hood called Flipside was rumored to be the shooter that killed Lawski. And as Lawski was a well-loved member, 19-year-old Pierre Boozer, who goes by Lil Pooh, will be killed right outside of his house in Sauk Village only 2 days later. And sadly, just a month before Big Mike came home, Wooski's other brother, Ballski, real name Glenn Watson Jr., was in a house on the 3500 block of South Roads, Bronzeville neighborhood of Chicago, when he was approached by multiple shooters and shot to death. This family has suffered many tragic losses, which is sad to see. We're sending our condolences out to the families of everyone mentioned in this video. Big Mike would get out a month later and eventually release a song, Out Now, which racked up over 800,000 views.
Yeah, I'm out now. Bitch, I'm hot now. I got you locks now. I can slide now.
If you enjoy this kind of content, hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.
He told him what he told him. That was my brother, he broke. Gotta act like I don't know him.